Welcome, everybody. Lighting Essentials. Don Giannetti here, and today I have with us J.B. Sauceda, who is an Austin photographer and editorial, advertising, graphic design, photography, everything. Jay, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I saw your book. We're going to talk about your book. Jay's written a book called Y'all, and
Yeah.
when I saw that, I said I've got to get Jay on the show, talk a little bit about that. But before we do that, I teach workshops for photographers who want to start out in the business, Jay, and I want them to get going the right way so they're not out undercutting everybody or lowballing people or they don't have any clue because that hurts the entire industry. And I found your website after I saw the book again, and you've changed your website several times since I've been following you,
Mhm.
and I have followed you for a number of years. But you have the quintessential perfect website, my friend. You've just
I appreciate
nailed
that.
it down. This is exactly what I teach the photographers that they should be looking at. How do you come about building a website like this?
You know, my website's had a lot of iterations over the years, and yeah, I mean, we've sort of internet associated with one another for some time now, and I know that since we first started interacting, I'm thinking back through all the different sites. It's really easy to get caught up in the fluff and look around for different templates that might have all kinds of animations and music and all that kind of randomness. And especially when you're first starting out and you feel like your portfolio isn't very strong, or maybe you don't have a lot of work to show, it's easy to rely on a lot of gimmicky things like that to prop up your work. But if you look at a lot of the photographers that I really like, and people who I've followed for a long time, most of the time you stop having to show off using all these little, again, I call them gimmicks, but animations and flashy websites, and you just let your work speak for itself. When you go to an art gallery, generally the walls are white, the floor is poured concrete, the ceilings are white, and the work is hanging on a white wall framed, in relatively simple framing, and it's allowing the work to kind of speak for itself. And that's generally the mindset that I take with regard to my website as well. I'd like for it to, just function uh, as just a platform for my work to kind of sit on. So yeah, it's pretty simple. Normally the editing process is done in a way that I went back and I spoke with a lot of art directors and art buyers that I've worked with in the past and just asked them, what do you like in a website? What are the things that you need uh, to do your job correctly? And we looked at my site as like a product, right? Like if you download an app on the App Store for your phone and it doesn't function very well and it makes it difficult for you to do X, Y, and Z, you're not going to use it that often. You're probably not going to be able to recommend it to other people or whatever. And one of the big things, as Don kind of clicks through, one of the biggest features that I like about this particular site is that each one of my images creates a unique link or URL for people to click on. I think it just went away, Don.
Oh, is it there?
Yeah, there we go. Okay.
I,
Yeah, so it creates a unique URL that you can see up top. And, art buyers were telling me that oftentimes when they're trying to put together little, mood boards of who it is that they want to hire, they need to provide examples, and it becomes really cumbersome to have to pull images from your website and then put them in a PDF and whatever. So a lot of times they like to just grab URLs to specific images on your website that might be applicable to the job that they're trying to bid you out on. And so the old website that I had, which was on Squarespace, didn't have that functionality at the time. And so I ended up switching to Verb, VIRB, and chose this template because it was simple. It was very similar to templates that I had paid to have designed in the past. but it had that specific functionality. Additionally, I photograph a lot of things, but my primary focus is on photographing people and on location. And so I just tried to boil my website down into one portfolio that someone who is looking at my work for the purposes of hiring me would be impressed by, and cut out everything else, despite how cool some of my other projects might be. And so that's why it's structured around a hero portfolio primarily. For all the other things that I do shoot studio portraiture, I do shoot travel photography. I created separate portfolios that people can go dig through. But when you land on my site, you see the thing that I'm selling, and I make it easy for you to check it out and engage with it. And if you don't like it, then no big deal. You can move it along. And if you like it enough and you just want to know a little bit more about my personality, or maybe just sort of my like personal creative endeavors, then that's what you would find under all the featured projects. They're either projects that I've really just enjoyed shooting on my own dime, or projects that someone's hired me for that I went out and just thought turned out really nice and pretty interesting. So
Well, it's very cool. We jumped right into discussing the website, and I think what I'd like you to do is tell me just a little bit about Jay. Where'd y'all go to school, and um, how do you got started in photography? You haven't been shooting terribly long, right?
no, I
11
just
years?
I went to school at the University of Texas. I grew up in East Texas in LaPorte, which is a little town outside of Houston, and grew up on the Gulf Coast. Spent 18 years there, and then moved to Austin to attend the University of Texas. Thought I wanted to work in political advertising, and spent some time working on a few campaigns, and then I'd been shooting a lot of video and photography stuff in high school, and so I had some basic understanding of it. And then when I got into to college, I interned for an ad agency here in Austin called the Butler Bros, and those guys gave me my start in the advertising industry, and just got me exposed to a lot of different projects. And because I have like a little bit of a design background and a little bit of a video and photography background, I was a good intern for them. They let me work on a lot of really random stuff. I mean, they hired me out and paid me to photograph some stuff for them. Not a lot of money, but great for an intern. But when it came time to graduate and finish with this internship, I talked to them about hiring me, and they were like, you were fantastic as an intern, but really we need like a full-time designer to work for us. And I'm not a designer by trade really. And so they essentially passed on me, and I was kind of forced to either go find some other job, which the conversation I had with them, which was a great one, was frank. And it was like, look, you're kind of a jack of all trades but a master of none at this point, and our recommendation is that you try to find some focus in your work and either go freelance, or focus on design and maybe try to get a design job. But frankly, if you're going to be a photographer, you're essentially going to be freelance. And so I was done working there. I started doing some freelance work as a designer and doing some web development and that kind of stuff. Very similar to the way a lot of photographers get started out. And then really just started shooting stuff, kind of toying around in my apartment. I mean, I used to follow Strobists, that blog. I don't even know if it's around anymore. I actually part of the way that I came to familiarize myself with Don was through the teaching and stuff that he does, and via Flickr. I was really active on Flickr back when it was really, especially a very booming photography community in the late 2000 aughts. And so anyway, started shooting around 2007, 2008. Didn't really get very serious about it until closer to 2009, and started asking around to really just try to understand how other photographers were shooting. And I had this friend named Adam Voorhees who actually, Don, if you want to bring his website up, it's
Ah,
V as in
such a
uh,
big fan of Adam.
yeah. So Adam's a good friend of mine. He lives here in Austin, and he's actually married to a woman named Robin Finley, who was an art director at Austin Monthly at the time. And Adam was like, "Man, your stuff is looking pretty sharp. You should go. You should try to do this for a living. Like, try to make a go of it." And so Adam, he just shoots still life photography primarily. He went to Brooks Institute in California, and really kind of took me under his wing and taught me a lot about the industry and how to bid projects out, how to not really like undervalue what it was that I was doing, and improve upon my skill set, and just I don't know. I mean, he just made me a much better photographer in a lot of ways. I mean, when I first started getting commercial work and was needing to start bidding on a lot of jobs. I mean, I had no understanding of how to even bid, and he helped me out with that. Meanwhile, he and Adam or Robin Finley were just kind of starting to date, and he plugged me in with her, and she gave me one of my first editorial jobs, just shooting for Austin Monthly here locally. So most of my portfolio for a long time was built out of projects that I had shot for her. And for Lauren Ford, who used to be the editor over at Tribeza, which is another local magazine here, and those two really gave me a lot of interesting projects, a lot of which are actually still in my hero portfolio to this day. And so that was really the basis of it. I kind of started that way. I had a design studio called Public School that I was a partner in. It was a group of about 7 of us that all had varying backgrounds, and we used to design and photograph different types of things and work on projects together. And we started a blog that developed a really big following online, and we kind of used that as the basis for building out our network and kind of getting our work out there. The blog itself generated a pretty sizable audience, and so we used that to promote other people's work that we thought was cool, and then oftentimes to put our own work up and show off anything new that we'd been working on. So it really helped, that in particular really helped accelerate my career and get me in front of the people that I knew were going to be hiring me, and using my skills for whatever projects that they were working on. So yeah, that's kind of the dime tour of my career, how I got to where I am essentially now.
Lots of hustle.
Yeah, it is. I mean, yeah, I don't know any photographer who's made it at any point uh, who hasn't had to hustle. It gets, in some ways, it becomes easier as your career grows and you develop further. Your resources available to you, I think, increase. The complexity of what you're doing increases as well, but you also have resources available to help you manage those complexities. And so, um, you never really stop hustling. It's just the type of hustling changes in some regard, I think.
And
But it's
it just becomes second nature too, because like you said,
yeah,
there just isn't anybody who's quote made it who
yeah.
doesn't hustle. It's even the quote under the often used overnight successes. It's an overnight success that only took 10 years of hustle.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not the type of person to talk poorly of anybody and look down my nose at anyone's career. But there's a photographer, and a lot of people can probably deduce who it is that I'm speaking about. But a photoeditor.com did an interview with a photographer who was very, very busy in the 90s and had a fantastic career and had a style that he had developed, and really just kind of like focused on that so heavily that he didn't really, in my sort of take on the situation, try to look ahead and figure out like what the next thing is that he was going to do, like what's the next trick that you learned, and ultimately what took place was that a lot of people just started mimicking the style that he had developed, and it became kind of the stylistic identity of what I perceive as like kind of late 90s photography, especially in the commercial world. Um, and there's an interview that a photo editor did with him where I always kind of felt like it was sour grapes. He was essentially just complaining about the fact that people ripped him off, and subsequently the work that he had kind of dried up, and he went from shooting 300 days a year to 20 or something like that. And my thing is like I don't know a single photographer who uh, stays busy by talking about work that he did 10 years ago. I mean,
Mhm.
you have to stay fresh. You have to be always shooting, or not that you just need to produce like a machine, but you need to keep people's interest. You think about like a TV show. Uh, with very few exceptions, like Seinfeld being one of them, very few TV shows can stop producing and people stay interested in them. At a certain point, you have to keep the storyline going and keep the interest there. Otherwise, people move on and they find something else to entertain themselves. And as photographers, we're pretty much a function of that same process that
Yeah, yep, I
uh,
totally agree.
we're there. So
Well, we always say we're as good as our last gig,
exactly.
and I know who you're talking about, and was definitely a photographer that I noticed. By the way, the tiny trains thing,
Yeah.
what brilliant,
Thank you.
freaking brilliant.
Yeah, that was so I got my pilot's license about 2.5 years ago. It's been like a lifelong dream. I grew up close to an Air Force base in Houston, and we're real close to the NASA's Johnson Space Center. And so the T-38s that the astronauts used to train in flew over my house. I mean, it was like every other day, it felt like. And so we spent a lot of time seeing those and seeing, I mean, my best friend growing up, his grandfather flew the first space shuttle, Bob Crippen, and so I mean, Houston's just like such a big aviation city, and I grew up wanting to do that, and so when I finally had the means to go about it, I did it a couple years ago, and the photo editor over at Texas Monthly, Leslie, called me up, and she's like, "Hey, did I see that you'd gotten your license somewhere?" I said, "Yeah, I did." And she's like, "Could you go shoot, this Pinto Canyon story that we have for our outdoor issue coming up?" And so they hired me. That's the spread that you're seeing right now. That's the image that ran. It was about a writer who had flown into this area of Pinto Canyon and landed. And the story was about how Texas is gorgeous, but some of the most beautiful places in the state are actually on private property. And so this area in particular, Pinto Canyon, is on the former CEO of Tyco International, his property. He owns thousands and thousands of acres out in the Big Bend area,
Hmm.
and essentially the only way to see it is by air. And so the story was about how she had been given permission to land there, and they went and checked out all these little like ruins and things that are on the property. And so I flew out there with a bunch of GoPros strapped to the plane and with cameras all loaded up inside, and basically just did a bunch of bomber runs through it and photographed it by hand and by GoPro. What they ended up choosing was one of the GoPro images, um, but that was a unique challenge in itself, just because the GoPro image that I was utilizing was it's a 12 megapixel image, so it wasn't like tiny, but GoPros have that fisheye effect, so I needed to correct for the lens the lens distortion, and then additionally it was being printed as a full two-page spread, so it was really kind of pushing the limits of that file to print something that large that had started out as like essentially just a time-lapse JPEG. But there are some people that kind of frown upon. I've never been a gearhead. My
Oh,
thing is like I can take a better photo than a lot of people with whatever. I mean, my buddy Matt Rainwaters had a professor at Brooks Institute that used to make that comment all the time that he could take a better picture with a trash can and a roll of film than what his students could, just because of his experience and his capabilities. And I've never really let equipment decide how I'm going to achieve something. And so this one was a project like that where I shot it with GoPros and was completely happy with what it produced. So
I've always it's a great shot. I've always looked at it the opposite way. My way of thinking is uh, the same thinking, but the opposite way of looking at it is I say if you can't take a good photograph with a cheap camera, you can't take a
yeah,
good photograph with an expensive camera because taking a photograph
exactly.
is separate
Yeah,
from the tool you use.
exactly. Yeah, and it's it's sort of the cliche like question, right? It's like, what did you take that with? Like as though that was the tool, or like the tool was what made the job,
Hmm.
and not the task. And so what that project actually. So while I was shooting it, I was flying around this Big Bend area, and that's how I photographed that tiny train sting. There's a train that travels every day between Marfa, Texas, and Alpine, Texas, and I just happened to be flying over it when I was heading back to the airport, and so I saw it. I'm kind of fascinated with trains. Just the idea that this one machine can pull that much stuff. And so I just flew over it for about 45 minutes and photographed. It's all the same train, but I just flew over it and photographed it from different angles and just kind of followed it along as it followed along the contours of the land. One of my favorite shots is of a lot of people. This one actually. That building is Prada Marfa, which has been photographed a million times.
Right.
And but I've seen a million photos of it from the ground, but I've never seen it photographed from the air. So I was happy to get that.
Now, is that an actual Prada store? Or
No, it's an art installation that an architecture firm, I think from Germany, uh, came up with the idea of developing. I think the idea behind it, and I'm probably going to butcher it to some extent, but was that you know gas stations and all kinds of buildings are left. They're abandoned and then left to sort of disintegrate, right? Like
Mhm.
you drive through a ghost town and a building's like falling apart. The one thing that you would never see have that kind of like happen to would be a high-end clothing store. And so this was sort of a commentary on that. Like they built this store, you can't go in. The doors or the glass is all bulletproof. The door is like welded shut. I mean, the shoes that are in there are only left foot shoes, so you can't go in and steal it and get a pair of Prada shoes. And the Prada bags that are in there don't have bottoms, so the incentive to break in and try to steal anything is pretty much nil. Uh, so it's been kind of interesting because the building is slowly deteriorating over time. Um,
That's
but kind of an interesting deal.
Let's get to your book really quick. I told you before we were going to do this, I was going to let you drive, and I'm having the hardest time doing that. So, um, I'm
Cool.
just going to do it from this end, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Talk about your book real quick, because what a great idea, Jay. Texas is, a lot of people know Texas. You talk to anybody,
Yeah.
I travel all over the world, and everybody knows Texas and California.
Yeah, so a couple years ago, just sort of as a joke, I started a Twitter account called Texas Humor that is really just made up of like us being stereotypically cocky Texans, and it grew into this audience. We have about 800,000 followers between Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And so I developed the idea to do some sort of like textbook around living in Texas, and I've been contemplating doing it for a while, and then I was contacted by a publisher who was looking for someone to write something similar, and they knew about me from Texas Humor, and we just kind of collaborated on an outline, and then they signed off on it and said, let's roll. So that was really how the whole thing came about. I mean, it kind of sit on the shelf, figuratively speaking, as an idea for about 2 years before I pulled the trigger on it, until the publisher said, like, yeah, we would love to take this on. This would be the budget. This would be, X, Y, and Z. And then uh, I basically contracted to write the manuscript and sort of develop it as a concept. And then one of my buddies from public school, my old design studio, was contracted to design it. And so he and I had some experience working on a few books together. So the publisher was really excited because traditionally when you write something like this, you write the manuscript and then you pass it off to the publisher who edits it, makes any changes that are necessary, and then the final manuscript is just delivered to a designer who builds the book out around the manuscript structure. But in our situation, what I preferred was I knew that there were probably a lot of opportunities, or there would be a lot of missed opportunities with that kind of I guess, design structure. So instead, we produced the manuscript, gave that to my buddy Cody, and then he and I collaborated on the design and ended up like writing a lot of additional material for the book to not necessarily to like fill in gaps, but there's a lot of like silliness to the book. If you go to actually, if you go to txhumor.com, Don,
TX Humor.
I can share. Yeah, txhumor.com. So this is, just one of my other businesses, and it's actually what keeps me pretty busy these days. So the header image, if you wait a second, it'll swap over to the book. So go ahead and click on that, and then scroll down a little bit, and you'll be able to see some of the other thumbnails. So like true spreads instead of just the single one-offs. But like we collaborated on there you go. We collaborated on a lot of the design stuff. I think if you click on that image, it'll pop up as a gallery.
There we go.
So anyway, we collaborated on the design. For example, the manuscript did not have any kind of quotes or anything in there, so we went back and added some of those things once it was designed. Same thing goes for like this sort of section. This is chapter 1, and it's a lot of just like very much like an encyclopedia. And we went in and filled in a lot of these boxes and came up with little concepts and stuff that weren't necessarily part of the manuscript when the book was being written. The manuscript looked a lot more like that next page, the beginner talking Texan that you looked at, where I wrote out paragraphs and sections and stuff about how to function as a Texan. And then what we went back and did once we laid it all out was developed all the little kind of the gags that you would see once you sat down and really dove into the book. But it's not really meant to be, I mean, someone could totally sit down and read through it in one sitting or a couple sittings, but we joke that it's purposefully like a really good toilet book. It's the kind of thing that you would leave your phone and go use the restroom and like dig through this thing for 6 months, because there's so many little jokes and subtleties to what we did that it's not really a front to back like actual manual. In fact, there is a editor, Andrea, over at Texas Monthly, who wrote a book. We unbeknownst to me, she was writing a book called How to Be a Texan, and I didn't know that it was going to be released actually within like a month of mine. We didn't like the name How to Be Texan for our book because we wanted it to be kind of silly. So we played around, and it was going to be called The Definitive Guide to Being Texan, but then Cody designed that cover with the word y'all in such big letters and with the words need this book under it. And so we joke that the like title according to the ISBN listing is Y'all, the Definitive Guide to Being Texan, but the title, like if you just search on Amazon, Y'all Need This Book, that's what pops up. So it kind of became the de facto title just because of the way that the layout is, on the cover. So, but it took about a year and a half from start to finish, from writing it, designing it, and printing
You're
it.
so lucky to have had a hand in the design. Speaking from experience, you are so lucky.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you.
It's the design is a whole other beast. It is a very difficult beast.
And one of the interesting things, we don't want to get on a discussion of ebooks, but one of the interesting things that I have found is that books and as a designer, you're a designer as well. Yeah, books have fonts that just have to be used. I mean, there's certain kinds of fonts that have to go with a certain kind of book, and just
Yeah.
and all of that. And the Kindle experience drives me crazy. I bought Gary Vaynerchuk's book on Kindle, and immediately after downloading it, went back and bought it on hardcover because I don't want to read that on Kindle. It's boring on Kindle. It's exciting.
Yeah, and this year again, not to go into books necessarily, but This year they said that the sales of print books has started to kick back up. So I think that in some ways there's like kind of this the novelty of reading on a Kindle. Not that it's gone away. I mean, there's certain books that I don't mind reading on my iPad, but
Oh
in
yeah,
some instances,
absolutely.
I love having just the book itself, and
But this book can't go on Kindle.
yeah,
This,
yeah.
they may
It's like
Kindleize it at some point, but it won't be this book. It'll be
yeah,
the information from this book. I'm glad to see what we've always known is that what stuff looks like matters. It
yeah,
matters to reading. It's what we are as visual people, and photographers are visual people. Um,
yeah.
and that's pretty interesting. By the way, are you on Snapchat yet?
I am. I am. It's just my name, Jayb Sauceda, Sauceda. I'm sort of a sporadic Snapchat user. I'm not quite as prolific as some of my friends and family, but I do use it from time to time.
It's a very interesting thing to me. I think it's the a glimpse inside what's coming next. And
Yeah,
I don't have a clue what's coming next, but it's not what we've done. That's all I can say. It's not what we've done. It's not what
yeah.
most of us are doing now. It's probably leaning more towards that. So, so Jay, tell me a little bit about. I mean, you've got a couple of things going on. You've got the book, and of course, you've got the Texas Humor, and that's your site as well, right?
Correct. Yeah. So that's essentially just like the sales arm of our social media account. And so we have a warehouse in South Austin where we ship everything out of, and the staff of employees that facilitate that for us. So it's been a very lucrative business for us. I mean, in large part, that business was founded because of just like the boom and bust nature of photography. I mean, I didn't start it because I wasn't making enough money as a photographer. I had a very what I perceive as being a very successful career in photography, and was always busy and shooting a lot. But it was more that certain times of the year are just slower than others. And so I was more just noodling around with some design stuff and with this social media account, and designed that Ain't Texas design based off of a joke that we make a lot about how Texans view the world as really only consisting of two places, Texas or Ain't Texas. And so I put that up on our social media accounts, and they just exploded. And so when that took place, it was like, all right, we got to do something with this. It's just kind of like sitting here. And I was able to lean on my experience as a photographer and advertising to build out what I feel like is a really good shopping experience, and one that's people kind of perceive us as being a much larger organization than we actually are.
Now, when you say
Um,
we, is it you and some partners, or
no, I mean my wife and I own Texas Humor together. It's just like we own that business. But I say we in that like totaled up between all of us, there are 15 employees, including my wife and I. So
Mhm.
we in the while developing this business, we really struggled with the fulfillment of orders and shipping them out and stuff. Like we were able to handle it just fine, but it's just a very boom and bust nature too. I mean, retail, you do gangbusters in the holidays, and then you're like slow the rest of the year. So part of what we struggled with as we were growing was just having the resources available to us to get orders out in a timely manner. And so, subsequently, we had to build up that staff to, ship all of our orders for us. And eventually, as we talked to more and more people who had businesses like ours, we realized that there was a huge need for people or services that can, do fulfillment for you. And so uh, we, Amazon does this. It's called Amazon FBA, and it's
Mhm.
just fulfillment by Amazon. And that's kind of like the big faceless machine that does this for a lot of people. We're more of like a boutique type shop. We do it for about 15 or 16 different stores, and they drop their product off with us. We manage their inventory. We or do inventory counting and all that kind of stuff. and sell or ship their products when they're sold on that, store. Um, so that's really, what we function as. The company is just called Sauceda Industries, and we ship for a bunch of different types of businesses, and a lot of it's clothing, but some of it's, consumer packaged goods and that kind of thing.
Oh, what a great idea.
Yeah.
Great.
So, I've actually scaled back how much shooting I do. I still do shoot a fair amount. Last year I did a big project for Texas Monthly. Um, I flew around the entire state of Texas and photographed it from the air. So that'll come out. That'll be at 20. I think they said it's getting 24 pages in the magazine, which is one of the longer, or if not the longest photo essay they've done. And that'll come out, I think, in July. So I'm really looking forward to that. That'll be. I shot 44,000 images on that trip over the course of about 6 days. So it's gonna be a pretty extensive project to retouch it all. We haven't even started on that. It's gonna be a pretty aggressive schedule here coming up soon to get that done. But yeah, I'm not shooting quite as much as I used to because the Texas stuff and the fulfillment business has kept me pretty busy. But what it's allowed me to do is shoot more personal work and kind of work on a few more like uh, just really taking on the bigger commercial jobs that I've liked and the clients that I've liked, and sort of not stay away, but I'm just not shooting quite as much for new clients or really aggressive shoot schedules. Um, so my sort of goals or my I've just sort of shifted careers a little bit in the way that I'm shooting, and just turning down I think a little bit more work than or not even I think I'm turning down more work than I used to, for sure. And now it's Texas Humor as a business has just afforded me the capability to uh, just shoot what I want to, essentially, which is really nice.
That's excellent, my friend. Excellent. Uh, Multiple channels of income.
Yeah, and really, that's how you got to do it. I mean, I don't know. It's not to say that every photographer has to, but I think that you look at any company. I mean, like sometimes as photographers, when you operate as your own person, it's hard to think of yourself as like a big organization. But like Texas Humor as a business started offering fulfillment services under the Sauceda Industries name because we wanted to diversify our store, because we knew that Texas has its own kind of economy based off of oil and everything else, and we knew that there were going to be an ebb and flow to that economy, and so we wanted to open ourselves up to sources of income that were outside of that normal kind of income stream. And so um, we sort of looked at the rest of the business, or my photography business is the same thing. I mean, it had one source of income or two. I mean, I had my royalty checks that I get for stock photography, which were decently sizable, a couple $1,000s a month, and then my actual photography career, which was substantially more. And the photography career was fantastic for about 8 months out of the year. But when you're shooting commercial work like I was, there are slow parts of the year when budgets are being worked on, or it's Christmas
Yep.
time or whatever. And that was the time that I just said, like, I'm sitting around on my hands just looking for stuff to do. I can either be marketing myself, which I did, or working on other business concepts. And that's kind of where the Texas Humor idea came from.
Well, that's a you're a hustler, my friend.
I'm Mexican, so we're born that way.
Well, you getting there and getting after it, and I love your work, Jay. Um, I think of you in my when I put boxes around people, and I think we all tend to do that. But I think of you as a pure photographer.
Thank you.
You're not a Photoshopper or illustrator. Not that there's anything wrong with that. There isn't. Everybody has a way to go. But for me, pure photography just rocks. So
Yeah, I'm just Voorhees is very much like, I mean, there's surprisingly very little that he has to do in post. The guy blows me away. I'll ask him about a project that he works on, and he's like, I shot that all on camera, and I don't doubt it. The guy is a a savant. He's like a Rain Man of photography, and he really, showed me how. I mean, to give you an example, I was bidding on or am bidding on a very large production-wise shoot that it's for a consumer product that keeps ice cold. I can say that. And anyway, I am bidding on this project, and we're looking at different options for how to photograph it. And essentially, we were going to need to photograph like, I don't know, 30 different, or not, maybe not that many, like 15 to 20 different models of the same thing in like 5 different settings. And it was suggested originally to go shoot background plates of the product and then go back to studio, photograph all the stuff in studio, and then just superimpose it. And in some sense, yeah, like going and shooting on location will be easier because they're not shooting like 15 different products in each different setup. But the retouching on that is just going to be a beast to manage, and matching lighting and all that. I mean, it was just going to get ridiculous. And so, I ended up just proposing, like, I can make all these images look very similar. I can do all of that stuff, and we can do it all in camera and knock this out in 2 days of shooting instead of 3 days of shooting plus 3 weeks of retouching, and everybody will go home happier, we'll all save money, and we don't need to run up anybody's bills, and hell, maybe you guys will have enough money left over your budget to shoot another job, So that's just how I operate. I'm not in the mindset that we need to just we don't need to undercut one another, but we also don't need to blow an agency's money just because they have it,
That's right. That's right. Well, Jay, it's been great chatting with you, my friend. I'd like to do this again sometime, maybe in the fall.
Yeah, man, I'd love to talk about, when that aerial project's done, it'll be really interesting to show just kind of the progression of how a project like that is undertaken. Like I said, it was 6 days, 36 hours in a small plane by myself, photographing with about 8 or 9 different cameras. So I think that'd be a pretty interesting thing to
I
show
think it
your
would be
audience.
fantastic.
Yeah.
I'll watch your website, or if you remember, drop me a note and say, hey, let's chat, and we'll set it up.
Yeah.
I have one
Will do.
favor for you. Would you let Adam know that I'm going to contact him for an interview as well? Big fan.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll let him know.
Fantastic. And Jay, I'm
Yeah.
going to link up your book here. I'll use the
Okay.
Amazon link, unless you'd rather
Yeah.
me use the one on the
No,
text.
Amazon's great. That'd be
Amazon's great.
perfect.
Okay. It's been fantastic chatting with you. I know you got to run. Have a great one, my friend.
You too. Thank you, Don.
You bet. Take care now.